It seems like every time you turn around, there's another headline about AI, and it's usually something scary, killer robots taking over the world or everyone losing their jobs. But what if we took a step back from all the doom and gloom and actually looked at the potential good that powerful AI could bring?
Well, that's a really interesting question, and there's actually a paper that tries to do just that. It's called Machines of Loving Grace, and it was written by Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic.
Now, if you follow AI safety at all, you've probably heard of Anthropic. They're all about making sure AI development doesn't go off the rails.
Exactly. So it's kind of surprising to see the guy leading the charge on AI safety also laying out such a hopeful vision of the future. Almost like the head of the fire department is also an architect sketching out the blueprints for a really amazing skyscraper.
I like that analogy. So in this deep dive, we're going to be exploring those blueprints, so to speak. We're going to dig into the technological assumptions behind Amodei's vision and really try to understand where he thinks AI could make the biggest positive impact.
And it's worth noting that Anthropic hasn't really talked much about the upsides of AI before.
Why is that?
Well, the paper touches on a few reasons. One is this idea of maximizing leverage. It seems like the train of powerful AI has already left the station in terms of development. It's driven by huge potential rewards and market forces.
Right. So it's like saying gravity will continue to work, but whether or not we build safe airplanes is up to us.
Exactly. But the risks still feel like something we can actually influence. That's where they focus their efforts.
I see. So it's about focusing on the things we can change, not the things that are inevitable.
Right. Plus, they don't want to come across as just doing PR for AI, constantly hyping up the benefits while downplaying the concerns. That would kind of make them look suspicious, wouldn't it?
Definitely. So there's a real effort to avoid over-the-top claims, or what Amodei calls sci-fi baggage.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Discussions about AI, both positive and negative, can sometimes veer off into these far-out scenarios like mind uploading or interstellar travel. Those are fun to think about, but they can make the whole conversation feel less grounded.
Less relatable, for sure. Amodei is trying to keep things more down to earth, focused on tangible possibilities.
Exactly. And I think that's a good approach, especially if we're talking about a future that's just around the corner.
Okay, so why even bother with an optimistic vision in the first place? I mean, isn't it enough to just focus on avoiding the worst-case scenarios?
That's where things get interesting. Amodei argues that fear can be a powerful motivator, but it's not enough on its own. We need something to aim for, a positive goal that goes beyond just preventing disaster.
So this isn't just about fire prevention, it's about actually designing the building we want to live in.
Exactly. So let's dive into that. Let's get into the specifics of the optimistic future Amodei outlines. We'll start with his basic assumptions about what he calls powerful AI. He intentionally avoids the term AGI, but the capabilities he's talking about are pretty mind-blowing.
So what exactly are we talking about here? What is this powerful AI?
Okay, imagine an AI that's smarter than a Nobel Prize winner in just about every field imaginable: biology, computer programming, math, engineering, you name it.
Not just knowledgeable, but genuinely intelligent.
Exactly. And not some kind of disembodied brain in a jar either.
Yeah.
It would have virtual interfaces that rival human capabilities. It could read, write, listen, speak, interact with a mouse and keyboard.
Yeah.
Basically do anything online that a human can do.
So like a super-powered remote worker.
In a way, yes. It could handle any task you could throw at it online, from designing complex experiments to managing huge logistics operations.
And crucially, it wouldn't just be passively responding to prompts. It could work on these complex projects autonomously for hours, days, even weeks at a time.
Right, like an incredibly efficient and proactive project manager. It would know when to ask for clarification or if it hit a roadblock. And while it wouldn't have a physical body in the human sense, it could remotely control existing tools, robots in factories, specialized lab equipment, even design and iterate on new tools.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, especially for anyone with a computer science background. Amodei predicts that by around 2027, the computing power used to train these top-of-the-line AI models could be repurposed to run millions of these powerful AIs simultaneously.
Think about that. Millions of these hyper-intelligent agents, each working at speeds 10 to 100 times faster than a human. Amodei uses this great analogy: a country of geniuses in a data center.
That's a powerful image and a bit intimidating, honestly.
It is. But we have to be careful not to fall into the trap of thinking about this as some kind of instantaneous transformation, like the singularity. Amodei pushes back on that idea.
As well as the opposite idea that superintelligence wouldn't really change much because of the limits of the physical world.
Right. He argues for something in between a messier, more gradual process, where progress is substantial, but still grounded in reality.
So not a sudden leap forward, but a rapid acceleration nonetheless.
Exactly. To help us understand how this all plays out, he introduces the concept of marginal returns to intelligence. The idea is that for any given problem, increased intelligence might be the key bottleneck, or it might be something else entirely.
Like having a super smart chef but no ingredients to cook with.
Right. So he lays out several factors that could either limit or enhance the impact of superintelligence. First, there's the inherent speed of the outside world.
Meaning some things just take time, no matter how smart you are.
Exactly. Biological experiments, developing new hardware, these things are limited by physical processes. Then there's the need for data. Even the most brilliant AI can't solve a problem without the right information to work with.
Like trying to predict the weather without any weather stations.
Exactly. And then there's intrinsic complexity. Some systems are just inherently chaotic and unpredictable, even for a superintelligence, like trying to model the long-term climate or the stock market.
And of course, there are human factors, laws, regulations, ethical considerations, and just plain old societal pushback.
Right. Think about nuclear power. The technology has been around for decades, but its adoption has been shaped by all these human factors. And finally, you can't escape the laws of physics, the speed of light, limits on miniaturization, things like that.
So we have this spectrum of limitations, some more absolute than others.
Amodei makes an interesting distinction between short-term and long-term constraints. Something that seems like a major roadblock today could be overcome with advanced intelligence down the line.
Like finding clever workarounds or inventing entirely new approaches.
Exactly. So maybe AI can figure out how to run biological experiments faster or develop new tools to gather data we can't even imagine right now?
So some limits are fixed, but others might be more porous over time.
I like that, porous. So with all that in mind, let's look at the specific areas where Amodei expects the most radical transformation, starting with biology and health. He calls this the compressed 21st century.
What exactly does he mean by that?
He believes that powerful AI could essentially condense 50 to 100 years of anticipated progress in biology and medicine into a span of just 5 to 10 years.
Wow, that's incredibly ambitious.
It is. But he argues that biology is the area where AI has the clearest potential to directly improve human well-being. We've already seen amazing progress eradicating smallpox, developing vaccines, but we're still facing a huge burden of disease globally. Amodei thinks AI could act as a catalyst to supercharge our understanding and treatment of biological systems.
Now, some people might be skeptical. We've tried to apply AI to biology before, and it hasn't always been a smooth ride.
True. There's always the garbage in, garbage out problem. If the data is bad, the AI can't work miracles. Yeah. But Amodei's vision goes much deeper than just using AI to analyze existing data.
So it's not just about crunching numbers.
Right. He imagines AI becoming a virtual biologist, capable of doing everything a human biologist does, designing experiments, formulating hypotheses, even inventing new measurement techniques.
But at superhuman speed and scale.
Exactly. He points out that historically, progress in biology has been driven by a relatively small number of truly revolutionary discoveries, often centered around new tools or techniques.
Like CRISPR for gene editing, or the development of powerful microscopes.
Right. He estimates that maybe one major breakthrough like that per year accounts for more than half the progress in the field.
So his argument is that AI could dramatically increase the rate at which we make these fundamental discoveries.
Tenfold, maybe even more. He thinks the returns to intelligence are especially high for this kind of breakthrough thinking, which relies on connecting the dots and having creative insights.
It's not just about having tons of data, it's about knowing what to do with it.
Right. He does acknowledge that some limits are hard to overcome, like the time it takes to run certain experiments or develop complex hardware. But even a tenfold increase would be transformative.
Absolutely. And then there are clinical trials, which are often seen as a major bottleneck in getting new treatments to patients.
Amodei points out that a lot of the slowness is actually because we're testing drugs that are only marginally effective. When a treatment shows real promise, the process moves much faster.
Like with the mRNA COVID-19 vaccines.
Exactly. So he thinks AI could create much more accurate, preclinical models, which would let us identify promising treatments early on and potentially streamline the whole clinical trial process.
Reducing the need for those large, time-consuming human trials, especially for breakthrough therapies.
Right. And he also points out that once we have these innovations, they tend to be adopted pretty quickly in the biomedical field.
So he's really painting a picture of a compressed 21st century where we make decades of progress in just a few years.
And with that acceleration, he predicts some pretty amazing advancements. Think. Vaccines for virtually every infectious disease, elimination of most cancers, cures for genetic diseases, prevention of Alzheimer's, better treatments for everything from diabetes to heart disease.
Even biological freedom, as he calls it. Greater control over our bodies, our weight, appearance, even reproduction.
And maybe most shocking of all, a doubling of human lifespan to around 150 years. He draws parallels with the huge increase in lifespan we saw in the 20th century.
So we're not just talking about incremental improvements, we're talking about a completely different world with unimaginable implications for healthcare, social programs, even our understanding of what it means to be human.
It's a lot to take in, but it's all grounded in current science and plausible trajectories. Now let's move on to another area where Amodei sees immense potential: neuroscience and the human mind.
What kind of breakthroughs does he envision there?
Amodei draws a direct parallel between biology and neuroscience, pointing out that progress in both fields has been driven by the development of powerful new tools.
Like optogenetics, which lets us control neurons with light, or those incredible microscopes that give us detailed views of brain structures.
Exactly. And he predicts a similar acceleration in neuroscience, maybe even on the same 5 to 10 year timescale as biology.
So another compressed century, but for the brain.
It is. What's really fascinating is how AI itself could become a powerful tool for understanding the brain. As we build more sophisticated AIs, especially in areas like interpretability, we gain insights into how intelligent systems work, both artificial and biological.
So AI research could actually help us understand our own brains better.
Exactly. He even mentions cases where mechanisms first discovered in AI have been found in actual animal brains.
That's incredible. It's like AI is holding up a mirror to our own minds.
Right. And Amodei thinks that the scaling hypothesis and the bitter lesson from AI research could revolutionize neuroscience.
Now, I'm not an AI expert, so could you break that down a bit?
Sure. Basically, it's the observation that in AI, simply scaling up relatively simple learning algorithms with tons of data and compute power has been surprisingly successful. It's often outperformed approaches that rely on more complex, handcrafted rules.
So bigger is better, in a way.
In a way, yes. And this suggests that maybe we should be focusing more on the overall objectives and architecture of the brain, rather than getting bogged down in the details of individual neurons.
Like trying to understand the traffic flow of a city by studying every single car, instead of looking at the overall road network.
Right. Amodei thinks a more top-down approach, guided by principles from AI, could lead to a deeper understanding of how the brain works.
So what are some of the specific ways AI could be applied in neuroscience?
He outlines 4 main avenues. First, traditional approaches like molecular biology, chemistry, and genetics, using AI for drug discovery, identifying genes linked to mental illness, that sort of thing.
So basically using AI to accelerate existing research methods.
Right. Second, developing better tools for measuring and manipulating brain activity. Think of next-generation neural probes that can record from huge numbers of neurons, or new techniques for tracking the history of neural activity.
So getting a clearer, more detailed picture of what's happening in the brain.
Exactly. Third, using AI to build more sophisticated computational models of mental disorders. This can help us understand the underlying mechanisms of conditions like depression and schizophrenia.
So not just treating the symptoms, but getting at the root causes.
Right. And fourth, using AI to develop more effective behavioral interventions. Think of personalized therapy programs or even AI-powered coaches that can help people improve their mental well-being.
So using AI to help people help themselves, in a way.
Exactly. And with all of these advances, Amodei predicts some pretty radical improvements in mental health. Cures or highly effective treatments for most mental illnesses, including PTSD, depression, addiction.
Even for more challenging conditions like psychopathy.
He thinks those might be harder, but still potentially solvable through research into brain plasticity. He also brings up the possibility of genetic prevention of some mental illnesses through embryo screening.
Which obviously raises some ethical questions.
Of course, but he also envisions more targeted solutions for everyday problems, improving focus, reducing anxiety, boosting mood.
and even enhancing our baseline experience, our creativity, empathy, cognitive function. It's like he's talking about upgrading human consciousness itself.
In a way, yes, it's a bold vision. And while he's cautious about more speculative ideas like mind uploading, he's optimistic about our ability to create a future where mental suffering is dramatically reduced and human potential is significantly enhanced.
Which would have ripple effects throughout society. Less crime, greater productivity, stronger communities. Now, even if we achieved all these breakthroughs in health and neuroscience, there's still a big question. What about economic development and global poverty?
That's a crucial point. It's not enough to just discover these amazing technologies. We have to make sure they benefit everyone, not just the privileged few.
So how does Amodei address this challenge?
He's a little more cautious here. He acknowledges that economic systems are incredibly complex, with lots of interacting human factors. He even expresses some skepticism about AI's ability to solve grand economic problems.
So he's not naive about the challenges.
No. He points out the very real issues of corruption, weak institutions, and political instability that plague many developing countries.
So it's not just about having the technology, it's about creating the right environment for it to flourish.
Right. But he also offers some reasons for optimism. We've seen examples of countries moving from poverty to prosperity, and we've eradicated diseases that disproportionately affected the developing world.
So there's precedent for using technology to uplift people on a global scale.
Exactly. And Amodei thinks AI could play a major role in this. He outlines potential progress in a few key areas. First, distributing health interventions more effectively. He's particularly optimistic about this given past successes with initiatives like smallpox eradication.
AI could help us predict disease outbreaks, optimize vaccine distribution, and even develop new technologies like gene drives to eliminate disease vectors.
Right. His goal is to have health in the developing world surpass even current developed world standards within 5 to 10 years.
Wow, that would have been amazing. What about economic growth?
He envisions AI-powered finance ministers and central bankers that could help developing countries achieve rapid and sustained growth. He points to the impressive growth rates of some East Asian economies in the late 20th century as a model.
So using AI to optimize economic policy and unleash growth potential.
Right. He also anticipates organic growth from improved health and neuroscience interventions, plus the wider adoption of other AI technologies. He sets an ambitious target of 20% annual GDP growth for the developing world.
That would be a game changer.
It would. He also talks about food security AI driving a second green revolution through advances in crop science and agricultural efficiency. And on climate change, he expects AI to play a big role in developing clean energy, carbon capture technologies, and sustainable food production.
So tackling some of the biggest global challenges.
Right. He's a bit more optimistic about reducing inequality within developed countries, where markets and political systems are generally more responsive to public demands. Wealth inequality, though, he sees as a tougher nut to crack.
And he raises the issue of people opting out of AI-enabled benefits.
Right, the opt-out problem. He thinks we need to understand this better and find ways to foster greater trust and acceptance of these technologies.
So a mix of optimism and caution.
Definitely. He's hopeful about using AI to spread the benefits of health advancements to the developing world. Economic growth is a trickier issue, but there's potential there too.
Okay, let's talk about the final area Amodei addresses. Peace and governance.
Even if we solve all these other problems, disease, poverty, inequality, the potential for conflict and instability remains.
So just having better technology doesn't automatically lead to a better world.
Right. And Amodei is pretty clear-eyed about this. He doesn't think advanced AI will inherently favor democratic or peaceful outcomes.
In fact, he points out the dual-use nature of AI. It can be used for good or for bad.
Exactly. He worries about things like AI-powered propaganda and surveillance, which could be incredibly powerful in the wrong hands.
So it's not enough to just develop the technology. We have to be very intentional about how it's used.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he emphasizes the need for democracies to maintain a leading edge in AI development, not for dominance, but to shape the norms and prevent authoritarian regimes from gaining an advantage.
So it's a race not just for technological advancement, but for ethical and responsible development.
Exactly. He proposes an entente strategy, where democratic countries cooperate to secure AI supply chains, scale up their own capabilities, and offer the benefits of AI to other nations in exchange for their support of democratic norms.
Like a global alliance for responsible AI.
Right. He also believes that if democracies can use AI to improve the lives of their citizens and promote open access to information, it could help counter propaganda and strengthen democratic institutions worldwide.
So AI could be a powerful tool for fighting disinformation and supporting freedom of speech.
Exactly. He also talks about how AI could enhance existing democracies, making legal systems more fair, improving government services, and even facilitating better consensus building among citizens.
So it's not just about external threats, but also about improving how democracies function internally.
Right. And while some of these ideas are still a bit vague, it's important to think big and have an optimistic vision for how AI can be used to promote liberty, justice, and equality.
So we've covered a lot of ground, from curing diseases to boosting economic growth to strengthening democracy. But there's one final piece of the puzzle: work and meaning in an AI-driven world.
This is probably the hardest question to answer. How will our societies function when AI can potentially do most of the jobs? What will give people a sense of purpose?
Will we all just be sitting around watching Netflix while the robots do all the work?
Well, Amodei doesn't think so. He argues that meaning comes primarily from human relationships, our connections with others, and the activities we find intrinsically rewarding.
So it's not just about economic productivity, it's about finding fulfillment in other aspects of life.
Exactly. He points out that people have always pursued hobbies, creative endeavors, social interaction, things they do for enjoyment, not just for money. He believes that these fundamental human drives won't disappear even if AI changes the nature of work.
So we'll still find ways to challenge ourselves and find meaning, even in a world where AI can do most of the heavy lifting.
Right. But he does acknowledge that the economic side of things is more complicated. In the short term, we'll probably see humans and AI working together, each focusing on their strengths.
But in the long run, AI could become so capable and cheap that our current economic models might break down.
Exactly. He draws parallels to previous historical shifts, like the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution. We've gone through major economic transformations before, and we've adapted.
So it's not about resisting change, but about anticipating it and figuring out how to create a system that works for everyone.
Exactly. He mentions a few potential models: universal basic income, an AI-powered economy that rewards uniquely human activities, maybe even entirely new forms of economic organization we haven't even imagined yet.
So it's a call for experimentation and creative thinking.
Absolutely. And he stresses the need for proactive policymaking to navigate this transition and avoid potential dystopian outcomes.
So the overall picture Amodei paints is pretty remarkable. A world where we've conquered disease, poverty, and even war, where human potential is unleashed and our lives are filled with meaning and purpose. It's a vision that, if it comes to pass, would be truly transformative.
He grounds this vision in concrete technological advancements and plausible trajectories. It's not a fantasy, it's a roadmap, a challenge to aim for.
And he reminds us that we all have a role to play in shaping this future. It's not something that will just happen to us, it's something we have to actively build together.
He ends with a really powerful thought: that even seemingly small steps forward in AI could represent a huge leap for humanity. It's a reminder to stay engaged, to question our assumptions, and to be open to the possibility that the future could be far more amazing than we can even imagine right now.
It's a lot to think about, that's for sure, but it's also incredibly exciting to imagine the possibilities.
I agree. And it's a reminder that the future is not predetermined. We have a choice in what kind of world we create, and AI is one of the most powerful tools we have at our disposal.
So let's make sure we use it wisely.
Absolutely.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the potential of AI. We hope it's giving you some food for thought and maybe even a little bit of hope for the future.
Until next time.
Until next time.